So if I'm doing some learning, for me to actually make the best use of that learning, I need to reflect upon that learning for me then to transfer it to a desired outcome.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, this is Rob from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Ricky from Thinking Focus.
And the question is, why is reflection so important to embedding learning?
Ooh, what a question.
Well, I guess what we need to deal with here is, what is reflection and why is it important?
And I think that's a really good place to start because I imagine, certainly in the work that we do, this is often a step in the learning process that's either lost or it's not done effectively. And there's a number of reasons for that. But ultimately, what reflection is it's that process when you transfer your learning to a desired action or behavior. And you can do this in a number of ways. In fact, we kind of lend a little bit of our theory from Paul Matthews, who's a friend of the business, but he's also a learning expert. And in his book, Learning Transfer at Work, he talks about the 5 levels of reflection. And he kind of leads into this. He describes them as a learning stack.
Right.
And they kind of increase the effectiveness of reflection as you go through the process.
So let's go through those then. So if I'm doing some learning, for me to actually make the best use of that learning, I need to reflect upon that learning for me then to transfer it to a desired outcome.
Yeah, and I think where learning's concerned, what you want to do is control that experience as much as possible in order to make the learning embed, help it land, and help the individual or group to be able to take the learning and apply that in practice. Because if we want a desired action or behavior, that's where we connect the actual learning to that in order to be able to do that new thing, that new action or behavior. The key thing is most people leave it to the individual to kind of work it out for themselves. And that's probably what you'd describe as unconscious reflection.
Okay.
What we're leaning on here is the availability bias, which means that learning is, when it's still fresh, we might ponder it, but we don't ponder in a way that is purposeful practice. It's more kind of, oh, I wonder how that would work, how that might work, but it's not meaningful, it's not deliberate, and it's certainly not helping you to really embed those skills.
Okay.
The next level, of course, which is a slight improvement, is where there's a conscious reflection. So what we're doing here is processing that learning. We're asking ourselves questions with a focus on self-improvement. And those questions are really related to the focus or our attention on what we might do better or differently next time. But again, what we're doing here from a learning standpoint is we're relying on the individual to make that connection.
So I get those two. So there's unconscious reflection, and then there's a more, if you like, deliberate conscious reflection. What happens next?
Well, what you're then looking at is this concept of external reflection, where we would encourage participants to take notes to support their reflection after the event. So they've got something to refer to. So when, we see that all the time. And one of the things we do in all of the learning programs that we run is we encourage people to take notes because repetition reinforces memory. It helps make connections. So giving a handout is one thing, but actually having made some notes on that handout means I've made a connection with that model or that learning point that's there. Another way you can do that is through a learning journal. And this is the process that helps us to formulate what in reality is our disorganized thoughts. And what we're trying to do is kind of jot them down in some semblance of order that we can then relate to them, refer to them, and be able to apply some meaningful practice as a result of that.
And we try to make that very easy, or easier, don't we, for the people that we work with in workshops, because we provide a notebook, we give them a pen, and we explicitly sort of go, it might be useful, or you might find it useful as individuals to write some of this stuff down. We don't dictate or provide lectures, but the facility for this external reflection, encouraging participants to take notes, is very much encouraged.
Absolutely. And I think we take it on a step further where actually there's external reflection with consequences. So what we're doing here is we're raising the stakes a little. So in other words, we have to articulate that learning to others. So we get this peer reflection going on. We encourage them to go back and talk to their boss or the program sponsors about their learning. And when there is a consequence, an expectation, it means that we're more likely to invest more time thinking through the learning that we've taken, because we're going to have to share it. So whether I'm having to share it with you or whether I'm having to share it with somebody else, the fact that I've got to share it, I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm talking about. Certainly don't want to look like I've paid no attention.
Yeah.
And therefore, I'm more likely to make purposeful notes as I do that. So the fact is, I'm having to replay what I've learned. And actually, with some clever coaching, actually, that might help me to really embed that. In fact, we've even built a tool on this, haven't we, in terms of our online gaming tool or our physical gaming tool called What Would You Do, which is about taking the reflective learning and saying, so what then? What are you going to do differently as a result of this?
Yeah.
And then what we're really looking to do then is perhaps, and you can't always do this, but the highest level of reflection is when you have to teach somebody else. And this doesn't mean take a set of notes and regurgitate them. This means actually planning and preparing the session. Whether you deliver it is actually not as important, but the ability to take some learning and play that back, prepare how you're going to land it, how you're going to deliver the learning points, how you're going to actually deliver the message or messages, they're fundamental to creating this deepened understanding of actually the topic or subject that you've got. So this expectation you've got to actually show somebody, and they need to be able to do something with this learning, increases the stakes even higher.
Yes. Because for me to teach somebody something else that I've learned means that I have to know it inside out. And further than that, I have to think about whoever the learner is, from my point of view, that I have to teach, or I'm going to pass this on to, because I have to think about how they're going to take the messages on, how they're going to themselves have this transference of understanding. So I can see from that description just how high a level of sort of reflection that is, because I'm going to have to absorb to such an extent that I can pass it on.
Absolutely. And the important thing here is, in reflective terms, it's not the sharing with others that's the important bit. It's the planning and the preparation. It's the testing your understanding in order to be able to play that back, to be able to answer any questions. Because if all you're going to do is regurgitate the information, when somebody asks you a question, you're not going to know the answer, and you're not going to feel confident. So you said,
No.
I want to know it inside out in order to be able to do this effectively. Well, in order to do that, you've got to apply yourself in a very different way.
Absolutely, I could get that. So what we've sort of looked at there is, I asked those first two questions of you. What is reflection, and a very clear description about what reflection is, the transfer of learning, so that somebody else can pick that up, and an action or a behavior can be impacted by it. You've answered the other question that I asked before, which is about why is it so important. And I think what I've got from that is the reason it's so important is because if reflection doesn't occur, then you're unlikely to retain any of the learning, or let alone make use of it. You've got no practical outcome from that. You've attended something, perhaps a course or a seminar or whatever. You've supposedly heard something or seen something delivered to you by somebody else, but you haven't learnt anything from it, because you haven't applied any reflection to it.
exactly. For us, the most powerful way of learning is when you connect the learning, the theory, and we share a lot of mental models across all of the work that we do. Well, unless you help me connect that with my day job, how am I ever going to know what to do and when to do it when I actually need to do it?
Right.
And that's one of the key elements, is that I need to be able to apply it at the point of need, i.e., when I'm faced with a given situation, I need to feel confident and comfortable. Well, if all I've done is turned up, listened, made no conscious effort to apply that learning in some way, shape, or form, even if it's, just walking myself through how that might work, well, that's at least something. But if I've got to play that back to you, Rob, and say, look, here's what I've taken, here's how I would do it. And if you're my boss, then actually you can coach me into going, well, what would happen if? And now you're helping me to flex with that knowledge, with that learning, and adapt that learning and that knowledge in order to apply it in given situations, because not everything is straight out the box, not everything works as it does in the classroom. Because one of the most common questions that we get, or one of the most common statements I should say, when we're playing what would you do as the learning game, is, well, it depends. Well, yeah, of course it does. Well, how do you help somebody to deal with things that are changing all the time? Well, we have to have some conscious reflection, some external reflection with consequences around what if then, and talk me through what you do here. So you're coaching people through that, which is a level of reflection that causes people to have to process that in a given situation. And of course, what coaching does means we can go, will that work? How would that play out? What are the implications? What are the consequences? Who would benefit? Who would lose out? And you're starting to ask a whole range of questions to help somebody land that knowledge, embed that learning, so they are prepared for when they need it.
So reflection is obviously very important to embedding learning. How can I do it? Is there a model or something that I can use to actually help to make this easy for me to do, or easier?
Well, it's funny that you asked that question, Rob, because in true thinking focus style, there is a model. And we've borrowed this from Borton's model of reflection. It goes back to the early 70s. I think it's 1970, which was a vintage year for some of us. Um, but it but it simplifies this right down into basically three really simple steps. And aligned to what I said earlier around coaching, actually, it's going to ask three simple questions, which is what, so what, and now what. So, as an example, what is the problem or issue? What is the learning that we've taken? So, what does that mean? What can you take from that? How will you apply it in practice, in the workplace, back in the day job? And then now what causes them to go, so what will you do differently then?
Right.
And the coaching element can connect that for them.
Yeah. So there's the link there in that last part specifically to the desired action or behavior. Now what are you going to do about it then?
Connection of learning to action and behavior, which is the all important thing, right? That's the whole point we learned it in the first place.
Absolutely. Why is reflection so important? To do exactly that. If you don't want to do that, if you don't want to connect it to improving an action or improving a behavior or changing it in some way that's beneficial, then don't bother reflecting. Just turn up, listen, disappear. But you're not going to get anything from it. So it's a waste of your time and your effort and energy, if you're going to do that.
But it doesn't need to be formal learning in order to use this model. You could read a book, you could watch a video. You could watch one of our videos. We've got loads of them on YouTube. But you could watch a video. You could observe a colleague doing something, applying their particular new skill or behavior. It doesn't matter what it is in terms of the learning experience it's in itself.
Yes.
The question is, what does it mean? What does that mean in terms of what you're going to do differently? What impact will it have? How will it play out? What are the consequences type thing? And then now what? Now what are you going to do about it?
That's really neat. So what we've done there, Ricky, and thank you for the insight, is that we've sort of put the case for, why reflection is so important, what it is in the first place, and shared a very simple, straightforward model about how to do it better, how to reflect on something and make it meaningful and impactful. What, so what, now what, as a very simple, if you like, internal coaching tool that you can use with others to enable them to reflect on their learning, whatever that experience is, and do something with that learning.
Absolutely. And we'll make this model available as a download link in the description below if you want it.
Next time on The Question Is.
And what it's basically saying is, I can't cope with any more. So I'm either going to slow down or I'm going to just stop, because you're asking it to do too many tasks, too many things all at once. And that's probably a good way of kind of explaining the autopilot. There's lots of things the computer's doing in the background, but actually, when you're consciously asking it to do stuff, like recording this podcast, for example, it's basically taking up some effort in order to do that.
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organization, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.